The Model T Ford truck of Lee Chong had a dignified history. In 1923, it had been a passenger car belonging to Dr. W. T. Waters. He used it for 5 years and sold it to an insurance man named Rattle. Mr. Rattle was not a careful man. The car he got in clean, nice condition he drove like fury. Mr. Rattle drank on Saturday nights and the car suffered. The fenders were broken and bent. He was a pedal rider too, and the bands had to be changed often. When Mr. Rattle embezzled a client's money and ran away to San Jose, he was caught with a high-haired blonde and sent up within 10 days. The body of the car was so battered that its next owner cut it in two and had it a little truck bed. The next owner took off the front of the cab and the windshield. He used it to haul squids, and he liked a fresh breeze to blow in his face. His name was Francis Almones, and he had a sad life, for he always made just a fraction less than he needed to live. His father had left him little money, but year by year and month by month, no matter how hard Francis worked or how careful he was, his money grew less until he just dried up and blew away. Lee Chong got the truck in payment of a grocery bill. By this time, the truck was little more than 4 wheels and an engine, and the engine was so crotchety and sullen and senile that it required expert care and consideration. Lee Chong did not give it these things, with the result that the truck stood in the tall grass back of the grocery most of the time, with the mallows growing between its spokes. It had solid tires on its black wheels, and blocks held its front wheels off the ground. Probably any one of the boys from the Palace Flophouse could have made the truck run, for they were all competent practical mechanics, but Kay was an inspired mechanic. There is no term comparable to green thumbs to apply to such a mechanic, but there should be. For there are men who can look, listen, tap, make an adjustment, and a machine works. Indeed, there are men near whom a car runs better, and such a one was Gay. His fingers on a timer or a carburetor adjustment screw were gentle and wise and sure. He could fix the delicate electric motors in the laboratory. He could have worked in the canneries all the time he had wished, for in that industry, which complains bitterly when it doesn't make back its total investment year in profits, the machinery is much less important than the fiscal statement. Indeed, if you could have sardines with ledgers, the owners would have been very happy. As it was, they used decrepit, struggling old horrors of machines that needed the constant attention of men like Gay. Mac got the boys up early. They had their coffee and immediately moved over to the truck where it lay among the weeds. Gay was in charge. He kicked the blocked-up front wheels. "Go borrow a pump and get these pumped up," he said. Then he put a stick in the petrol tank under the board which served as the seat. By some miracle, there was still a half-inch of petrol in the tank. Now Gay went over most of the probable difficulties. He took out the coil boxes, scraped the points, adjusted the gap, and put them back. He opened the carburetor to see the petrol came through. He pushed on the crank to see that the whole shaft wasn't frozen and the pistons rusted in the cylinders. Meanwhile, the pump arrived and Eddie and Jones spelled each other on the tires. Gay hummed dum-diddy as he worked. He removed the spark plugs and scraped the points and bored the carbon out. Then Gay drained a little petrol into a can and poured some into each cylinder before he put the spark plugs back. He straightened up. "We're going to need a couple of dry cells," he said. "Let's see if Lee Chong will let us have a couple." Mac departed and returned almost immediately with a universal no, which was designed by Lee Chong to cover all future requests. Gay thought deeply. "I know where are a couple. Pretty good ones, too, but I won't go get them." "Where?" Mac asked. "Down cellar at my house," said Gay. "They run the front doorbell. If one of you fellows wants to be kind of edge into the cellar without my wife seeing you, they're on top of the side stringer on the left-handed side as you go in, but for God's sake, don't let my wife catch you." The conference elected Eddie to go, and he departed. "If you get caught, don't mention me," Gay called out after him. Meanwhile, Gay tested the bands. The low-high pedal didn't quite touch the floor, so he knew there was little band left. The brake pedal didn't touch the floor, so there was no brake, but the reverse pedal had lots of band. On a Model T Ford, the reverse is your margin of safety. When your brake is gone, you can use the reverse as a brake, and when the low gear band is worn too thin to pull up a steep hill, you can turn around and back it up. Gay found that there was plenty of reverse and he knew everything was all right. It was a good omen that Eddie came back with the dry cells without trouble. Mrs. Gay had been in the kitchen. Eddie could hear her walking about, but she didn't hear Eddie. He was very good at such things. Gay connected the dry cells and advanced the petrol and retarded the spark lever. Twist her tail, he said. He was such a wonder, Gay was. The little mechanic of God, the St. Francis of all things that turn and twist and explode, the St. Francis of coils and armatures and gears. And if at some time all of these heaps of cars cut down Duesenbergs, Buicks, DeSotos, and Plymouths, American Austins, and praise God in a great chorus, it will be largely due to Gay and his brotherhood. One twist, one little twist, and the engine caught and labored and faltered and caught again. Gay advanced the spark and reduced the petrol. He switched over to the magneto, and the Ford of Lee Chong chuckled and jiggled and clattered and happily as though it knew it was working for a man who loved and understood it. There were two small technical legal difficulties with the truck. It had no recent license plate and it had no lights. But the boys hung a rag permanently and accidentally on the rear plate to conceal its vintage, and they dabbed the front plate with a good thick mud. The equipment of the expedition was slight: some long-handled frog nets and some gunny sacks. City hunters going out for sport load themselves with food and liquor, but not Mac. He presumed rightly that the count was where the food came from. The 2 loaves of bread, what was left on Eddie's winning jug, was all the supply. The party clambered on the truck. Kay drove and Mac sat beside them. They bumped around the corner of Lee Chong's and down through the lot, threading among the pipes. Mr. Malley waved at them from his seat by the boiler. Gay eased across the pavement and down off the curb gently because of the front tires showed fabric all the way around. With all their alacrity, it was afternoon when they got started. The truck eased into Red Williams service station. Matt got out and gave the paper to Red. He said Doc was a little short on change, so if you'll put in 5 gallons in, and just give us $1 instead of the other 5 gallons. Why, that's what Doc wants. He had to go south, so you know. He had a big deal down there. Red smiled good-naturedly. You know, Mac, he said, Doc got to figuring if there was some kind of loophole, and he put his finger on the same one you did. Doc's a pretty bright fellow, so he phoned me last night. Put in the whole 10 gallons, said Mac. Don't wait. I'll stop around, and it'll slop around and spill. Put in 5 gallons, and 5 in a can, one of them sealed cans. Red smiled happily. Doc kind of figured that too, he said. Put in 10 gallons, said Mac, and don't go leaving none in the hose. The little expedition did not go through the center of Monterey. A delicacy about the license plates and the lights made Gay choose back streets. There would be the time when they would go up Carmel Hill and down into the valley, a good 4 miles on the main highway, exposed to any passing cop until they turned up the fairly infrequently Carmel Valley Road. Gay chose a back street that brought them out of the main highway at Peter's Gate just before the steep Carmel Hill starts. Gay took a good, noisy, clattering run at the hill, and in 50 yards he put the pedal down to low. He knew it wouldn't work. The band was worn too thin. On the level it was all right, but not on the hill. He stopped, let the truck back around, and aimed it downhill. Then he gave it the petrol and the reverse pedal, and the reverse pedal was not worn. The truck crawled steadily and slowly, but backward up Carmel Hill. And they very nearly made it. The radiator boiled, of course, but most Model T experts believe that it wasn't working well if it wasn't boiling. Some should write an erudite essay about the moral, physical, and aesthetic effects of the Model T Ford on the American nation. 2 generations of Americans knew more about the Ford coil than the clitoris, about the planetary systems of the gears than the solar system of the stars. With the Model T, part of the concept of private property disappeared. Pliers ceased to be privately owned, and the tire pump belonged to the last man who had picked it up. Most of the babies of the period were conceived in the Model T Fords, and not a few of them born in them. The theory of the Anglo-Saxon home became so warped that it never quite recovered. The truck backed sturdily up Carmel Hill, and it got past Jack's Peak Road and just going into the last and steepest pull when the motor's breathing thickened, gulped, and strangled. It seemed very quiet when the motor was still. Gay, who was heading down the hill away, ran down the hill 50 feet and turned into the Jack's Peak Road entrance. "What is it?" Mac asked. "Carburetor, I think," said Gay. The engine sizzled and cracked with heat, and a jet stream that blew down the overflow pipe sounded like the hiss of an alligator. The carburetor of a Model T is not complicated, but it needs all of its parts to function. There's a needle valve, and the point must be on the needle, and it must sit in the hole of the carburetor, or it will not work. Gay held the needle in his hand, and the point was broken off. "How in the hell you suppose that happened?" he said. "Magic," Max said. "Just pure magic. Can you fix it?" "Hell no," said Gay. "Go ahead and get another one." "How much they cost?" "Well, about $1 if you can buy one new, a quarter at the wreckers." "You got $1?" Mac asked. "Yeah, but I don't need it." "Well, get back as soon as you can, will you? We'll just stay the night here. Anyways, you won't go running off without a needle valve," said Gay. He stepped out up to the road. He thumbed 3 cars before one stopped for him. The boys watched him climb in and start down the hill. They didn't see him again for 180 days. Oh, the infinity of possibilities. How could it happen that the car that picked up Gay broke down before it got to Monterey? If Gay had not been a mechanic, he would have not fixed the car. If he had not fixed it, the owner wouldn't have taken him to Jimmy Bruce's for a drink. And why was it Jimmy's birthday? Out of all the possibilities in the world, the millions of them, only events occurred that lead to the jail, Salinas jail. Sparky, Anea, and Tiny Coletti made up the choral and were helping Jimmy to celebrate his birthday. The blonde came in. The musical argument in front of the jukebox. Gay's new friend who knew judo hold and tried to show it to Sparky and got his wrist broken when the hold went wrong. The policeman had a bad stomach, and unrelated, irrelevant details, and yet all running in one direction. Fate just didn't intend Gay to go to that frog hunt, and fate took a hell of a lot of trouble and people and accidents to keep him from it. When the final climax came from the front of Pullman's bootery broken out and the party trying on the shoes in the display window, only Gay didn't hear the fire whistle. Only Gay didn't go to the fire, and when the police came, they found him sitting alone in Holman's window, wearing one brown Oxford and one patent leather dress shoe with a gray cloth top. Back at the truck, the boys built a little fire. When it got dark and chill crept up from the ocean, the pines above them soughed in the fresh sea wind. The boys lay in the pine needles and looked at the lonely sky through the pine branches. For a while, they spoke of the difficulties Gay must be having getting a needle valve, and then gradually, as time passed, they didn't mention him anymore. "Somebody should have gone with him," said Mac. About 10 o'clock, Eddie got up. "There's a construction camp a piece up the hill," he said. "I think I'll go up and see if they got any Model Ts." Okay, I think that's as good as it's going to get.